Thank you. Well, good afternoon, everybody, and it's a pleasure to be able to come here and speak about something I feel very passionately about, to the great and the good of highways maintenance. I'm just sorry that there are not a few more other politicians around, lead members for transport, and I hope that they will another time be able to be here, because unless they're committed, it doesn't work. Forgive me if when I speak it sounds a bit parochial and I talk about Buckinghamshire, but the model we've chosen, I'm sure, can be copied and repeated elsewhere, and it's not difficult. And I'm sure many of the things I say will strike a chord with the local authority representatives here today. I've been Cabinet Member for 6 years on transport in Buckinghamshire, which means I was here before we integrated and here afterwards. I've lived a bit longer than the Secretary of State for Transport's normally last. By profession, I'm a physiotherapist. I went from the public National Health Service into private sector, and I'm very hands-on. It's part of my profession. And with the job now, I still have to be hands-on, perhaps not quite so hands-on, but virtually hands-on. But it does require a lot of commitment from the political leaders. Otherwise, it just doesn't happen. So if I can give you just a quick overview of what I'm going to say, tell you a bit about Buckinghamshire, why we moved on, how we're doing it, our outcomes, and then looking ahead. So if we look at Buckinghamshire, you can see our usual turnover. It's an average-sized county. You can see where it is in the United Kingdom. Just in case you didn't know, it's the shortest distance between London and Birmingham. And in our, I've also fighting the High Speed 2 challenge at the moment, but I promise not to bore you about that. I'll do that speech another day. We've got a population of 500,000. We've got two main towns. Aylesbury particularly is a growth area, and that has had its own challenges, but brought its own money with it. We have Silverstone, which you see up on the top there, and recently we were delighted that Bernie Ecclestone decided to carry on investing in us, and we would have the replacement stand. We also, in the bottom, you can see that lovely Dorney Lake, where we should be doing the rowing for the Olympics. On the right is the Prime Minister's weekend residence, the Chequers, and of course we do have Stoke Mandeville, which is the home of the Paralympics. That's the sort of transport service we are, pretty average, I should say. Our capital has improved this year tremendously, so we're up to 17 million. We were nearly down to 5, but the government has given us an increased grant, thrilled about. You can see the sort of roads and pavements and things, all what I'm sure all of you have. Our vehicle journeys are increasing, a little bit down with the recession, but our bus journeys are going up, rail journeys, and the dreaded school transport journeys, which we're trying to get a handle on. So back in 2008, we were performing very strongly. That's me in the middle holding the Transport Local Authority of the Year award. We were a 4-star council, we were a centre for excellence, and we had a strong track record of efficiency within transport services. So why change? Well, as we've been hearing today, there's an increasing demand we have from public and stakeholder expectation, inflation, significant growth, and we have a very difficult, I'm sure all of you have, public who get more and more fussy and choosy and want everything. Our budgets were declining with our capital budget, and the county council as a whole predicted a £30 to £50 million gap in the corporate revenue budget. So therefore, we had to think how we were to do it. Transport had to take a cut of 3 to 5 million, which was difficult enough. We'd been doing our transport efficiency savings, just as Gershon told us, and you can see we were doing really well. But we were beginning to level out, and we'd just gone about as far as we could go in 2008-9, and we felt we had nowhere else we could get anything from. We'd done everything we could. We were required to make a £5 million saving. So we looked at how we did it, and I'm sure many of you do it this way. We had the council in the middle, the contractor one side, dealing with the consultant on the other side, and supply chain down the bottom. And when I first came into the business, I thought this isn't really a good way to work, but that's how it was. So it was very inefficient. We had, as we heard earlier this morning, about the master-servant relationship, elected members keeping out of the way. And I remember one email I saw saying, we don't let our cabinet member know that after I'd been to see a company. The duplication and the person marking and council teams and council staff often by nature can be very controlling and very defensive. And it's a difficult climate now with the chances of redundancies always around the corner for them. Any private sector innovation was quickly stifled. We had high overheads from those 3 different teams, too many managers, the old story, separate offices, systems and processes, which gave inbuilt inertia. So our vision was to have a partnership which did provide improvements and a reduction in costs, which is always a utopia. And we felt it could be achieved with full integration with the private sector, full commitment from elected members, private sector innovation and a change step in efficiency, which was quite a challenge. So what we decided to do is to put everything in scope, not just hive little bits and pieces off, to take and look at that turnover we had to try to, and at the same time, keep us highly efficient and top-performing service. We didn't want to compromise any of those things. And as we've said, ownership and drive has to start from the top. I had to be sure of doing it, and I'm a bit of an entrepreneur in the past, so I was willing and up for it, providing it was going to work. I had to be responsible back to Cabinet if it went wrong, and you sometimes get a bit of praise, now it's going right. But unless you've got that, you're wasting your time. So what we did, we involved the private sector very early on in the process, and went from 8 contractors down to 3, down to 2, and eventually to the 1. We learned a lot from them, and we asked them what they would do if we were running their council, our council rather, which was a bit of a cheek really, but it didn't matter because we got some ideas which we were later on got to use. We built a team. We had these virtual teams with each of the contractors as we got deeper into them, and it went on for nearly a year. We decided it would be better to have a competitive dialogue, so we had a complete clean sheet of paper. So we said, you know, just feel free. How would you make us work better? And then the test was to get to know those contractors, those teams, and it was amazing how different they were. And as you yourselves know, how different local authorities are. And I think one of the keys to it is that the contractor you're working with actually reflects the type of authority you are. We eventually, as you can see, chose Ringway Jacobs, and I liked them because they were a bit off the planet. They had the Scottish influence, which made them terribly good at snow, and snow and ice, you know, is a bit of issue with us. We had the American influence, which I thought was a bit wacky, and I quite liked that, and we had the straightforward English part of it. But I liked the thought that they were going to give us some really good ideas and give us some innovation. So we had to get this fit, and I've since then likened it a bit to a marriage. So you're flirting around with these 2 or 3 suitors, and you think which one wants to marry you and which one wants to work for you and who are you going to work for, and to share those objectives and outcomes. And of course you must keep the members directly involved, because otherwise you're stuffed, because they'll only repeat back. They're dealing with the public, and you know they've got to sell it too. We didn't want any duplication, so we have a very thin strategic client where they are senior managers of the county council working very closely with me. I see them like a bit like a cyclops moving out, but each one responsible for various part of the contract and to watch that works. We have integration and we have co-location, which is, again is terribly important. In a minute you'll see our grotty council building, but we all live happily together there on the 9th and 10th floor. So there's no having to make phone calls, they're there on the spot. I have regular meetings with my head of service, but equally with the head of operations, who is obviously a Ringo Jacobs member of staff. So we have, so that's where the private sector responsibilities is managing our staff, and some of our staff found it a little bit hard to get their head around to start with. We have, with the private investment and innovation, we have an open book so that we know exactly what's going on. We look every month at the budgets on term, that what they said they would do, that the key performance indicators, exactly what we said, and it's up to you to make that contract right as you at the beginning, and then if you need to modify it, then modify it later on. And the contract profit is linked to performance, so if they don't perform, they don't get their money.